Us here at Cultaholic, we're smart to the wrestling business. We know how it all works. Yeah, we know the lingo. We read the dirt sheets. Granted, we still spend £500 on replica title belts, but it's ironic. It's ironic. But sometimes we hark back to those moments when wrestling felt real. When we got suckered into the storylines, the predetermined results, and everything in between. Whether we were clued up or not, we all vividly remember those times when we got wizarked and took the bait. Hook, line, and sinker. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 10 greatest wrestling works ever. Join us.
But before we start, today's list is sponsored by NordVPN. We at Cultaholic truly believe that Nord is the best service of its kind. Firstly, it's super easy to use. Connect with one click or enable auto-connect for zero-click protection. There are over 5,300 servers in 60 countries, which is a hell of a lot. It has amazing speed, confirmed by the speed tests. NordVPN is the fastest VPN out there, and it's on every major platform. Oh, and there's a brand new threat protection feature, offering protection from trackers, malware, and even pop-ups and other intrusive ads. Great for browsing mucky websites, speaking from experience. So here's how I use Nord. Obviously, I live in the United Kingdom, but with NordVPN, I could set myself to be anywhere in the world virtually and access content from those regions. So this means, if I fancied it, I could set myself to be somewhere else in the world virtually and sign up for a certain sports entertainment network for a much cheaper price. Or, if I happen to live in the United States, I could sign up for that sports entertainment network, even though it doesn't really exist in the United States anymore. No peacocking about, just great quality graps for a much cheaper price. It's the equivalent of buying a cup of fancy coffee every month. A small price to pay, I'm sure you'll agree, for premium cybersecurity and access to a whole range of entertaining content. Oh, and there's even a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if NordVPN isn't for you, you can get your money back, no bother at all. So grab your exclusive NordVPN deal by heading to nordvpn.com/cultaholic. There is a link in the description below, obviously, and get a huge discount on your NordVPN plan, plus brand new threat protection, plus an additional month for free. nordvpn.com/cultaholic. And remember, if it's not for you, you can get your money back. 30-day money-back guarantee. You cannot say fairer than that, but trust me, you're not going to want to get rid of this. Pays for itself. nordvpn.com/cultaholic. Click the link below.
Number 10, Savage attacks Steamboat. One reason why Randy Savage was one of the best of his generation is due to the sheer intensity the Macho Man exuded every time he was at work. On the mic, in the back, in the ring, he was unpredictable and ready to snap at seemingly a moment's notice. In November 1986, Savage was in the midst of his legendary Intercontinental title reign, and after sensing that Ricky Steamboat was good enough to threaten his reign, he viciously assaulted the Dragon after a match between the two, elbow dropping Steamboat's larynx onto the top of the guardrail and further crushing his throat with a ring bell shot from the top. The crowd were at fever pitch during Savage's assault, pelting Macho Man with garbage as Steamboat was loaded onto a stretcher and taken to the back. This incident caused issues between the two to explode, with Steamboat returning months later to stop Savage attacking George Steele in a similar manner. Ricky and Randy's feud would increase in violence until Steamboat finally vanquished Savage for the belt at WrestleMania 3. Number 9, Brock busts Orton. Brock Lesnar's path of destruction after his WWE return saw him break arms, break streaks, and end title reigns. But nothing was more visceral than the ending to Brock's SummerSlam 2016 main event clash with Randy Orton. The second ever televised singles match between the two, and the first since 2002, it was presented against the backdrop of Lesnar's UFC 200 return. Leading into the match, the two played off of real-world events, with shots from Orton and seeming almost real in intent, whilst WWE hyped it up as F5 versus RKO. After many German suplexes and an F5, Orton kicked out, leading Lesnar to repeatedly elbow Randy in the head until he lay in a puddle of blood, getting the win by TKO as the crowd struggled to process what they had just witnessed. When Lesnar got to the back, a furious Chris Jericho squared up to him, demanding to know if he went into business for himself, not sure if what he saw was real or not. I mean, it wasn't Chris, but it's good to know that we weren't the only ones who were worked here. Number 8, CM Punk leaves with the gold. Yes, we all know the script by now. Pipe bomb, Money in the Bank 2011, CM Punk, John Cena. The reason this story took off was the expert blending of kayfabe and reality, with Punk's fourth wall breaking on the mic, the idea of who management wants versus who the people want, to the revelation that Punk's WWE deal was legitimately expiring. Heading into Money in the Bank, for all intents and purposes, Punk was done with WWE as soon as he left the building. And when he blew that kiss to McMahon and hightailed it into the streets of Chicago, even the most clued in of us thought, he hasn't actually gone, has he? Well, we didn't have to wait too long until Punk returned, unfortunately, as WWE didn't have the patience to fully commit to the ruse that the straight-edge superstar was MIA. But for those couple of weeks where miserable Phil popped up everywhere from Comic Cons to random back gardens with the spinner belt over his shoulder, wrestling was truly exciting again. Number 7, Dreamer blinds Sandman. When wrestling was hotter than the sun, WWF and WCW was still acknowledged as fake by the mass media. But ECW? Man, that stuff was real, and like UFC, it terrified Middle America. Paul Heyman welcomed this controversy, obviously, and if people wanted to think that ECW was real, then let them. But at no point was ECW realer than during the storied Tommy Dreamer Sandman rivalry of 1994. Dreamer became hardcore after receiving multiple lashes from Sandman's cane, and the two collided again in an I Quit match where Dreamer accidentally pushed a lit cigarette into Sandman's eye, with Sandman taking a cane shot to his other eye, blinding him. ECW pulled the curtain back right away, showing heels and face mingling as Woman called Dreamer a bastard while Tommy apologized. Sandman stayed at home and was not seen in public, and fans bought it when ECW announced that he was legitimately blinded and would retire. However, it was all a ruse, and Sandman came back months later, duped the innovator of violence and the fans, and battered Dreamer without mercy. Number 6, Linda rises. At WrestleMania X7, Vince McMahon wanted to beat up his own son because Shane was annoyed that Vince was having affairs, and that Vince's request for a divorce sent Linda McMahon into a catatonic state where she sat there looking gormless while doped up to the eyeballs. Professional wrestling is simply untouchable, isn't it? Anyway, the two eventually met in a street fight, and it was far better than it had any right to be. Towards the end of the carnage, Vince plopped Linda on a chair in the corner so that she could watch her soon-to-be ex-husband bludgeon their firstborn with a bin. Then it happened. Linda stood up, and all 67,000 fans in Houston's Astrodome lost their marbles as sweet Linda kicked Vince McMahon square in his famously enlarged grapefruits. It says a lot that at the perhaps most well-regarded show in WWE history that happened during its hottest period, one of the loudest pops of the night was for Linda McMahon standing up. Again, professional wrestling is simply amazing. Number 5, Vader crushes Enoki. Everything about wrestling is a work at the end of the day, the moves, the storylines, and especially the results. When an unexpected result comes out of nowhere, it can be extremely effective, like the stunned silence when Brock ended the streak. But sometimes it gets a little hairy. Introducing Antonio Enoki, the nigh unbeatable big-chinned wonder, founder, and biggest draw of New Japan. In 1987, Enoki had been undefeated for 2 years, and after quickly downing a bloodied Riki Choshu, a new opponent debuted and challenged Enoki on the spot, introducing the mastodon known as Vader. The fans knew that Enoki wouldn't lose. It was Antonio Enoki after all. But a few minutes later, and Vader had defeated the biggest star in Japan, handing Enoki only his second loss in a decade. To really put over this new hulking behemoth, Vader proceeded to batter Enoki, and the usually respectful and reserved Japanese audience could not stand it, igniting a riot which saw seating set on fire and hurled throughout Sumo Hall. Naturally, New Japan were banned from the venue for 2 years. Number 4, Mark Henry retires. Convincing works as something of a rarity in modern wrestling due to hardcore fans being able to find out pretty much anything with the internet at their fingertips. But in June 2013, we were all caught completely off guard when a salmon jacket sporting Mark Henry showed up on Raw, ready to ride off into the sunset and retire after missing much of the previous 12 months through injury. With tears in his eyes and a raucous WWE audience cheering him on, we all thought that the 12-year veteran was actually hanging up his boots, with WWE Champion John Cena on hand to give due praise and respect to the world's strongest man. After Henry told his daughter that he was coming home, Cena went to embrace him, only to eat a world's strongest slam out of nowhere as Henry barked that he still had a lot left in the tank. So convincing and effective was this segment that all you have to say to a wrestling fan is salmon jacket and a knowing smile creeps across their face. Number 3, I respect you, Booker Man. When is a work not a work? When it's a shoot. But is it a work? A shoot work? Schwork? Are you confused? Well, congratulations! You are Eric Bischoff in 1996 after being absolutely hoodwinked by Brian Pillman. The loose cannon constantly blurred the lines between kayfabe and reality. Leading into Super Brawl 96, Pillman's antics had drawn the ire of Taskmaster Kevin Sullivan, with the two scheduled to have an I respect you strap match. 15 seconds in, Pillman grabbed the mic, barked I respect you, Booker Man, to Sullivan, WCW's head booker at the time, and disappeared into the audience before a confused Arn Anderson took his place. Pillman and Bischoff then had a massive row backstage and Flying Brian was fired. So far, this was all a part of the plan, with Bischoff wanting Pillman to leave WCW before returning and becoming a big star. So, in order to work the boys and the dirt sheets, Pillman convinced Eazy-E to legitimately fire him. Eric agreed, but Pillman wasn't coming back, going first to ECW and then WWF for a truckload of cash. Well played, that man. Number 2, Koloff beats Bruno. WWF in the 1960s was all about one man, Bruno Sammartino. The second ever WWE champion, Bruno holds the record for the longest ever run with the belt, a record that will likely never ever be broken. So dominant was Bruno that he held on to the title for 7 years, or 2,803 days if you prefer. No one ever thought Bruno would lose, it was Bruno after all, but then on day 2,804, the living legend faced off with Ivan Koloff in Madison Square Garden, and Bruno lost. There were no boos, no cheers, just stunned silence as the Russian Bear did the impossible. And then the calm and collected New York audience sighed, got to their feet, and went home. Or they nearly rioted. I can't remember which one. WWE officials were anticipating the poo to hit the fan, so to speak, and so quickly ushered Koloff to the back as crying fans couldn't believe that their hero had been vanquished. Fearing things could get ugly at any moment, Koloff dropped the belt to Pedro Morales after a 3-week reign. Number 1, the Montreal Screwjob. Just kidding. Number 1, the NWO, Agents of Vince? The early days of the NWO were simply amazing when Scott Hall and Kevin Nash ran roughshod throughout WCW, smashing dweebs with baseball bats, powerbombing Eric Bischoff off a stage, hijacking broadcasts. It was anarchic and unpredictable, and fans could not get enough. The driving force behind the angle was a blurring of kayfabe and reality, as Hall and Nash and WCW themselves implied that the pair had been sent by Vince McMahon to destroy the competition. Fans bought it and started tuning into Nitro in droves. Vince McMahon got so incensed that he actually sued WCW for defamation and copyright infringement, as Scott Hall was basically just Razor Ramon in everything but name at this point. Whilst WCW and WWE were battling on TV, the two sides were battling over the NWO backstage. The lawsuit was eventually settled in 2000, with Vince McMahon having first refusal if WCW ever went up for sale. A year later, WCW would go out of business, and Vince McMahon would buy them for sod all thanks to the NWO. So the question remains, did Vince send the NWO after all? The answer is, of course, no. Goodbye.